I don't see the possibility there.
That's the problem is at these sites, especially Ionis, we see this extremely fine andesite basalt stonework. So there's already this position, and Graham Hancock did a great job with his Netflix series, season 1 and 2 of Ancient Apocalypse. I don't know if you've seen it yet.
I've seen a lot of season 1.
He did a great job. I give him props for that. Thank you for laying that foundation down. You know, Randall Carlson, Graham Hancock, John Anthony West, Robert Schock, Robert Bivall. There's so many names that I could say. Props to all of you guys. Thank you so much for laying such a great foundation down of us exploring what potentially could be a much earlier and sophisticated and lost time period of human history.
Has it hit you yet that someone like you, who's been a real student of the game for so many years, who wanted to learn more, just started with your own curiosity and worked your way into being an expert, that now you are potentially sitting here on the precipice of being able to go in with an official team that you're in charge of to do an excavation of sorts on something that could change the way we view a certain part of history in really towards the middle of the earth right there?
Yeah, I feel extremely blessed, very, very, very appreciative that I have been able to take a lot of this research and a lot of this passion and that I've done in writing to a completely different level. One that's never, frankly, has never been done. We've never had a team of academics and top experts in their field truly go in and investigate these in a scientific, objective way to finally create something where we can say, look, we have evidence to support that this lost human chapter of human civilization is real, and that it has been overlooked and has been something that the narrative needs to strongly consider, is that the story of human civilization is more complex and more mysterious than we've been told.
Now, what are you, when you get down there, what are you most looking for? Like, what are the top 3-ish type things that you're going to be trying to identify?
So what we're going to be doing is we are going to be identifying the type of stone that has been used to build these. That's a really, really big deal. Again, it gets back to understanding the Mohs hardness scale. If you have stone that is of a hardness of 6 or 7, which is basalt, it's a type of volcanic stone, the tools you have available for a civilization and the capabilities of that civilization come in, they matter. They really come into hand, because it's not that easy just to create a giant megalithic temple. The amount of work and people involved and calculations and everything involved is not simple. It's a great undertaking, and you have to have a civilization that has reached a certain level to be able to do that. It's not easy. It's a nomadic tribe of hunter-gatherers or primitive kind of warlike people would not be able to create great works of art through stone, because it is art. It's beautiful to create stones that are so tightly fit together that you can't even put a piece of paper between them.
It's incredible.
And then carve seamlessly beautiful, beautiful motifs and symbols into them, even cross-fitting on the stones between them.
Cross-fitting on the stones?
Cutting it, this is another fascinating aspect of this, is that Ionis, one of the sites, Ionis Kalesi on the banks of Lake Vaughan, has symbols carved between the stone fitting. So, which is wild to think about. So if you're carving with a chisel and you're like, and you're trying to put that in, how would you seamlessly carve with razor sharp edges, almost laser-like cuts, seamlessly between two blocks that fit together? How would you do that?
With a chisel? I don't see the possibility there.
That's the problem, is at these sites, especially Ionis, we see this extremely fine andesite basalt stonework that is, again, beautiful. Some of the arguably the finest, some of the finest megaliths in the world in terms of how they're polished and put together and seamless. And in that way, we see these where the fittings are, where the blocks come together very, very precisely. There are symbols carved right between that overlaps where the blocks come together in a completely seamless way. So when you look at, I don't know if Alessi can pull something up. Can you look up Ionis Kalesi for me? I can show you an example of this.
Oh, yeah, please. I was just going to ask. Curious what this looks like.
Yeah. Ayanis. And then Kalesi, Kalesy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It'll be, yeah, you'll be able to find it, and I'll give you some. I just want to give some examples of this as we're talking about it, because I think it really is easily right. The one right in the center, right down, right to left, right there. By the way, that's me on the one in the picture to the right of you. See that?
I did not see that. Can we zoom in on that, Alessi?
This is a perfect example. Now scroll above the altar and go right into the cross.
Yes.
Go right in there tight. Right in there.
That's the best we got.
Okay. So take a look at these symbols carved in. You can see a griffin on the left. You can see some of the symbols of Haldi and then some of the crosses.
The pine cone type figure.
Right.
Yeah.
Now look at how the symbols are carved between the blocks fitting together. It's to do that.
Oh.
And they're so seamless that they're not even off fitted. Like they're not even like off by
They're not. It's
by
like
a centimeter.
Yeah.
How would you do that with modern tools or ancient tools, I should say? How would you be able to seamlessly cut these symbols out of, by the way, one of the hardest stone on earth? This is what's called andesite. It's even harder than basalt. They're both volcanic, but andesite is a type of metamorphosized volcanic rock that is a 7.5 on the Mohs hardness scale out of 10. One of the hardest stones on earth. Look at how precisely these symbols are carved. And by the way, that is what's called the sun cross in the center, which becomes the Knights Templar cross and the red cross we see in the night. We've talked about it in the Vatican and others, which is very peculiar. But that's what I'm talking about is on the left side, you can see what I think is like an hourglass figure next to the griffin. Those symbols are carved seamlessly into blocks that are fitted together. Now, the only way to do that in my mind is if it hit back once. You can see a couple other examples, but the only way you could do that is to have the blocks already put together and then carve it into them, right? Because if you were to carve two symbols into blocks like that, how would you then fit them together to have them aligned perfectly? Right? It wouldn't.
It would be too hard.
It would be too difficult, and so.
Yeah, I mean, we can. This picture right here is so like HD. You can see it even better.
And look at the griffin on that one block.
Yeah, the
right?
lining is insane.
So that's what we're talking about. Is number one, how could an Iron Age? The Urartians were an Iron Age civilization, which they only had Iron Age tools available to them. 2800 BC. How would they have been able to cut and create symbols out of that kind of stone? Which, by the way, we don't even know where. Some of these quarries, geologists have identified some of the quarries where these blocks came from. Mm-hmm. Some of them are over 200 miles away. One of them is speculated to be 400 miles away.
Whoa! Because
of the type of basalt and andesite, it's insane how we don't even know how they moved them. But then once they put them in place, how could they get seamless symbols and motifs cut out of them? You know what it looks like? People have told me. It looks like almost like cookie cutters.
Yes.
So like if you like
exactly
a 3D printer or something, right? If you had something that was like you stick it right in, boop, it's like clay or something, and then it comes out. Now that brings up the question of whether or not these rocks were superheated.
That's what I was going to ask. So right. If they do that and they're so massive, like obviously if they're heated at that kind of level, it's like if you touch it, you're going to burn.
It's mysterious. If anything, it would be to the point where I don't even know outside of laser type of tools if we could even do this today. With that kind of precision, a stonemason, like give me an example. There have been stonemasons that have brought into Tiwanaku in Pumapunku in Bolivia, which also has laser-like cut edges and symbols, just very similar to this. In fact, we're going to talk about a lot of parallels to that today. They've been brought into that, and they're like, I couldn't do this. I don't know any stonemason that could do this by hand. Maybe with some kind of a technology, like some kind of a laser-like technology. But it brings up the question is, if we could barely do it or not do it, how could an Iron Age civilization from 2800 BC do this? And that's really where the question comes in. And I want to, Alessi, can you go back once? I just want to show another example before we move on to get to some other stuff. Okay, right there. Just leave it there for a minute. Now, we've talked about this before, but I want to bring it up one more time. All of that brown dirt you see on top of the andesite.
And for people listening, not watching, we're back on the original image we had of all the
Thank you.
of all the same crosses that are carved into this.
That is not actually dirt. All of the brown material above the stone is actually eroded mud brick. Okay?
Mud brick?
Mud brick. So the Urartians primarily build out of what's called mud brick, where they would take mud and types of soil material, and they would basically create bricks out of them, let them sit out in the sun, they harden, right? And then they would build with them. And that none of that is actually dirt. It's eroded mud brick. Now, if they built 2,800 years ago with the mud brick and it eroded to that level, imagine those blocks being in that level of being precise still and not eroded. Imagine the difference there, first of all.
Oh, yeah.
Now, archaeologists claim that this is a building style. And I would agree, it is a style some places around the world. A culture, or even today, you'll see Roman Greco and other things where they build out of stone and they have something more lighter on top because you need a foundation that is stronger, okay? That's the argument that they use, that the Urartians built with stonework on the bottom and then mud brick above it on top. Because these were all incorporated into castles. That's what the word Kalesi means. They're castles. And they were castles, but that doesn't mean they originally were castles. Okay, that's the thing that really needs to come across here, is that any civilization we see around the world adopts ancient sites. They know it's important. They often will incorporate symbols into their culture from another ancient site. We see it all around the world. They'll adopt a site and then build right on top of it. It happens all the time. The Romans are famous for building on top of older foundations of structures. We see that in Baalbek, Lebanon all the time. So what is being laid out right now is that archaeologists are saying the Urartians built this unbelievable andesite on the bottom with these stonework and then built primitive mud brick right on top of it. And that's where it was everywhere. But the problem is that it doesn't really make sense. And the only reason why they're saying that is because there's cuneiform writing written into some areas of these temples and these structures. Cuneiform. So we see the wedge-like cuneiform design into the outer part of Ionis when you first come in. However, that's the only piece of evidence, and there's no other evidence they're using to back it up. Because if you translate this Urartian cuneiform, it talks about rulers like Rus II and other rulers who wrote in this temple was built. Or they don't even say they built it. They just say this temple is built in honor or whatever it is. But they don't say anything about the original foundations or anything. But they claim ownership of these sites. Okay, and for a certain dynasty or time period. That is the only evidence that archaeologists are using to say who built it, is the cuneiform, except there's a problem. Throughout Egypt, we have evidence from say, the Ramsey culture and other dynastic Egyptians that they would write and carve hieroglyphics into other existing structures and claim ownership for them, right? That's one of the arguments for the Sphinx, is that it was recarved and it was originally not the same head. Well, that's the same problem we have here, is that the Urartians, and it's a thing that is very common in the ancient world, is trying to take credit for something because you want to seem greater and more majestic. And I postulate that all of the cuneiform, all of it, is from the Urartians, and that this mysterious civilization that built this left no writings at all behind. None. We see the same thing in Egypt, is there's no writings left behind from the builders of the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Yeah.
There's no writings.
Luke Caverns in here going through a bunch of that timeline. It's crazy. Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.